Nico Collins, payday.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Wednesday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you to all of our first-time listeners and viewers. Please do us a simple favor, just 3 favors, really, actually. Subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you to all of our returning listeners coming back to listen to Cody and myself talk Texans for another day. I am your Texans football analyst, John Some Sports Guy Hickman. On the other side of the screen, Texans Credential Media member, Sports Illustrated's own Cody Davis. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. Must be the money. I was waiting to get to that. Must be the point. I get money. I get money. Cody, it's the money show. Nico Collins got paid. Take it away.
Finally, the podcast that we've been dying to make. Nico Collins got a bag from the Houston Texans. But before we get into Nico, matter of fact, after we get into Nico, because today, of course, as you guys know, is going to be the Nico Collins show, because we're going to open up talking about the news of Nico Collins. And then we're going to transition over to what is the realistic expectations for Nico Collins, because yes, look, the man recorded 1,300 yards during the 2023 season, but majority of those, a good bit of those, a good portion of those came after Tank Dell had went down. And then you also got to take a look at the fact that not only are you adding in a healthy Tank Dell, but you're also adding in Stephon Diggs. And then speaking of Stephon Diggs, we're going to close out the show because yesterday marks the 50th day that the Houston Texans had an opportunity to land Stephon Diggs in a trade from the Buffalo Bills. Unfortunately, we have not had an opportunity to hear from Stephon. It's coming pretty soon, guys. Just wait. Mandatory minicamp is coming within the next, I want to say, 7 to 10 business days. So we're definitely going to hear from Stephon Diggs pretty soon, but we do want to revisit that trade and see whether or not trading for Stephon Diggs was the best case scenario for the Houston Texans, because as you guys know, the Texans did come close to landing Keenan Allen. But ladies and gentlemen, as you guys know, as I mentioned, we're going to open up this show talking about the big bad, the contract extension that Nico Collins got from the Houston Texans on yesterday afternoon. Nico Collins signed a 3-year deal worth up to $72.7 million. But John, this is the best part about that contract we literally just talked about last week. $52 million guaranteed. This makes, I want to say, the second time the Houston Texans had an opportunity to be comfortable giving that much money to one player. The other player that we are talking about is Danielle Hunter on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage. But John, I'm just so thrilled and happy that the Houston Texans and general manager, first and foremost, before we even get into it with Nico Collins, shout out to Nick Caserio, because this extension also marks the first draftee to get a huge bag like this from the Houston Texans. Shout out to Nick Caserio taking that risk to trade back up in the third round, late in the third round, to get Nico Collins, who was I don't want to say an unproven prospect, but a prospect that came into this organization with some questions, because remember, he did not participate in the short COVID season. He took a bet on himself and trained for the whole entire year. I remember talking to him for the very first time when the Houston Texans had drafted him. He was crying alongside his family. And over the last 3 years, Nico Collins have always talked about, both on and off record with me, about the desire to be great. And John, this contract, this extension, not only showcased the importance of what he means to this organization, but it also showcased that he's inching closer to his desire, to his willingness to be great, especially the next great wide receiver for this organization.
I love it for Nico, and I love it for Houston. A 3-year deal. So
Mm-hmm.
you look at once that third year is up, 25, 26, 27. Okay, now you're going to start looking at other players that need to be paid. And those players, it'll be a great handful of them will be Houston's impactful players, at least as we look at them right now. So I think for Houston's side of a 3-year deal, you're not having to worry about CJ's contract. You're not having to worry about Tank Dell contract. You may be able to be on the last 50 option for Derek Stingley. I think if not, he may just be going into his first year of a major deal. In terms of money, Laremy Tunsil, Titus Howard, they'll be on the tail end of their current deal. You got Blake Fisher waiting. So hopefully by that time, he'll be ready to step up and play football, and he'll still be on a rookie contract. So in terms of money, this worked out for both sides, right? And I think specifically for the Texans, they, again, like Danielle Hunter, they're giving themselves wiggle room to address other needs and not have so much compacted together at one time. So I love that. A lot of the major deals won't hurt Houston within their 3-year span. And for Nico, I think this is great for him because, number one thing you mentioned, Cody, he bet on himself his COVID year, didn't go back and play, trained, right? Got drafted at Michigan, got drafted by the Houston Texans, traded up for by the Houston Texans by Nick Caserio, a franchise that was in the dirt at that time in terms of, everything, honestly, quarterback, marketability, wins and losses. They were in the dirt. A lot of people didn't think Houston would be as good as they were last year. But to that point, Nico Collins, who bet on himself during his rookie year, continued to bet on himself, and he had a breakout year. I think, what was it, total – his first 2 seasons, I think he had a total of 700 yards. He doubled that last year, right? And time again, because we all saw the question marks, right? Is he a number one? How many receivers would you take over Nico? This, that, and the third. Well, guys, right now he's going to get paid currently like a top 7 wide receiver in the NFL. And I think that he deserves it. I am shocked that they didn't wait until mid-season, which is something that I predicted, maybe to see how much of last year's success can he replicate. I'm kind of shocked, but I'm glad for Houston because, as we mentioned the other day, we just talked about this. As we mentioned the other day, why it was important for Houston to get in front of the contract, to get him extended now, because you didn't want a situation where next year Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Ayuk, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Amari, like you got some receivers that Jayden Waddle, I don't think is going to make as much as those other guys, but you got some receivers that will be looking to get paid next year. So that's another thing that plays out in Houston's favor. We got a hometown guy, homegrown product. We're locking them in. We're locking them in at a fair price. And we're also beating the market surge that will happen. Right now, you got Tyreek Hill, who makes $30 million in terms of wide receiver money. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's at 30. Tyreek Hill is at 30. And so now you're looking at 30 being the top cap for wide receivers. Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb are going to break that. And if they are pushing the ceiling, then that means the floor is going to go up for wide receivers. And so now you're looking at Houston, who got Nico Collins 3-year deal, 72, 24 APY. Now 24, if they look into the future, could potentially be 26, 27. Those numbers may not seem like a lot, but hey, $3 million can get you a good depth player, good role player. We've seen Houston utilize small contracts before, i.e., we look at some of the successful players that they had on this roster last year. So I love it for Houston in the front office. Credit to Nick Caserio and his team for getting that job done. But back to the player, man. Nico Collins, like Cody has mentioned, has said from day one what he wanted to be for this organization.
Yes, sir.
This organization has had the the blessing from the football gods to be in the presence of Andre Johnson, Hall of Famer, DeAndre Hopkins, future Hall of Famer, no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm.
Two great wide receivers. Now you look at Nico Collins. What was it last year? 1,400 yards.
It was exactly 1,298, not
in the
97.
regular
So
season, but
in the regular
overall,
season,
close to 1,400 yards. And then
mm-hmm.
you also look at Nico Collins, the most receiving yards as an isolated receiver. Nico Collins, 546. So you look at what he did in terms of beating man coverage. You also look at just what he had to go through and experience before he even got to CJ Stroud. I mean, Jeff Driscoll cat is who he's taking passes for. So for the young man to get what he deserves, because he does deserve it, it's good to see. For Houston, what they have to do is make sure that going into this season, given all the weapons that they will have, you cannot deter and defer away from Nico Collins. I mean, he was a 70-yard catch player last year. Big catch after big catch, yards after run after yards after run. I mean, we know what he can do with the ball in his hands. I was watching highlights of him today, and he beats guys not strictly off of speed, but he has a long stride when he runs. So make sure he is a part of this offense, a focal part of this offense. But overall, man, shout out to Nico Collins. It's good to see a young brother get paid. It is winner take all time in the NBA and NHL. And FanDuel is doing you a favor. They're giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners. I want to give Cole Thompson at Mr. Cole Thompson on Twitter the shout out for this, because how Houston has put this roster together in terms of years and being prepared. Nick Caserio is a very smart man, and his team is a very smart team. Joe Mixon, 3-year deal, $27 million. Dalton Schultz, 3-year deal, $36 million. Laramie Tunsil, 3-year deal, $75 million. Nico Collins, 3-year deal, $72.5. Titus Howard, 3-year deal. 3. I like it because it's really because after you go through those big guys, and then Daniil Hunter, 2-year deal, and Stephon Diggs, just this year deal, then you're going to be looking at CJ, Tank, Blake Fisher, right? Mechie, Kenyon Green, right? Damian Pierce, Christian Harris, right? Then you start looking at some of those guys, and it's kind of like, oh, okay. Jalen Petrie, oh, okay. I see what they're gearing up for. That 2022-23 draft class, because that's going to cost them some money.
That's when they're going to be asking us to give to the Houston Texans, keep CJ Stroud in Houston fund.
Yeah, they better ask Nico. Nico got 72.5 reasons why.
Well, at least
CJ ass back in.
At least guaranteed 52. So at least the guaranteed 52.
You got it.
But John, of course,
what would you do with what? And listeners and viewers, you guys answer, please. What is the first thing you would do with $52 million? And I don't want to hear the political, the PC answer. I'm giving my 10% tithes and offering, or I'm buying my mama a house. I don't want, because that's never the first thing you're really going to do.
I don't know, John. To be honest with you, man. Like, I mean,
would you buy a Popeyes franchise?
No, I wouldn't buy a Popeye franchise. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know. I'll probably, go go reach out to a member of the Jacksons and be like, hey, which one of these real Michael Jackson jackets I could buy? You know, the one from Beat It that he actually won. Bet. And John, know I'm telling the truth too. That would probably be the first thing I would do. But when you take a look at the money that Nico Collins got, so happy for the young man. He deserved every bit of that money. But John, I think today is also a great opportunity, and this was a topic that you and I have been, playing around with for a little bit. Was going to wait more so for training camp when we see the wide receiving core in its entirety. But I think today is the first day that we can at least start playing around with the idea a little bit more here on the show, and that is what is the realistic expectation for Nico Collins. And John, I love the way that you put it in the first segment. You say, regardless of who they brought in, regardless of what is going to take place over the next 2 to 3 years, the Houston Texans have to make sure that they cannot defer away from Nico Collins. And I will 100% agree with that statement, especially knowing the fact that he is now the 7th highest paid wide receiver in the game over DK Metcalf and Deebo Samuel. So that got me thinking, okay, what is a realistic expectation for Collins? Because last year, 1,297 receiving yards, 80 catches, 8 touchdowns, had 5 games over 100 yards, had 2 games where he could have had 200, of course, career best. The season finale against the Indianapolis Colts, the young man went out there 9 for 9 for $197. But the one thing that I always go back to is when you take a look at a game like that, 1K85 success.
1,000 yards, 85 catches, 5 to 6 TDs equals success.
But here's the thing. Do you think he would still have those opportunities? Because last year, for majority of the year, it was just him and Tank Dell. The back half of last year, it was just him. Once again, 9 for 9 for $197 in the season finale against the Indianapolis Colts. Now, not only are you bringing in a healthy Tank Dell, you're also bringing in Stephon Diggs, who I still consider a top 10 wide receiver in this game. And you also got to take a look at the possibilities. And I know for the sake of this argument, it's really not going to mean much. But if we're looking at the reality of the situation, the potential improvements that we're going to see from John Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson. So when you look at what is fair value for Nico Collins, fair production for Nico Collins, like what is it? Like, I don't see him recording almost 1,300 yards again. But at the same time, he has to at least eclipse 1,000 yards for a second consecutive season. Now, I do want to mention he has the quarterback that has experience of sharing the ball around. Just take a look at what CJ Stroud had to do at Ohio State when he had that phenomenal wide receiving core. But John, I just don't want to just say that this offense is going to, quote unquote, or at least this position group is going to, quote unquote, live and die by Nico Collins like we saw last year.
They won't. And I think the one team that we could look to point and say this is how a successful offense can look when you have multiple very good, damn good number one guys is a team that Houston just stole a running back for a 7th round pick. Joe Mixon, the 2021 Cincinnati Bengals. That year, Joe Burrow, 34-14, over 4,600 yards. But you look at their wide receiving core, Jamar Chase. Oh my gosh. Jamar Chase, nearly 1,500 yards, 13 TDs. T. Higgins, nearly 1,100 yards, 6 TDs. Both of those guys average 14 or more yards per catch. Right, Jamar Chase, 128 targets. T. Higgins, 110 targets. T. Higgins, 74 catches. Jamar Chase, 81 catches. Again, 18 yards per carry for Jamar Chase that year. So I'm speaking of 2,000-yard receiver seasons from the Cincinnati Bengals that year in T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. And I know what you guys are thinking, but we got Tank Dell, Tyler Boyd, 94 targets, 67 catches, 828 yards, nearly 13 yards per catch, 5 TDs. But what about Dalton Schultz? He got to eat too. Yeah, well, CJ Uzama, 81 targets. Sorry, 63 targets, 49 catches, nearly 500 yards, 5 TDs. It's doable. Joe Mixon, 314 yards in the air, 3 TDs, 7.5 yards per catch, 11 first downs. It's doable. This is why Cody and I, and a lot of guys that I know that I speak with about the Houston Texans, they look at one person to unlock this offense. That's Bobby Slow, Coach Slow. You got the weapons to do it. It's been done before. Do we feel like CJ is better than Jalen Hurts, or do we feel like Jalen Hurts is better than CJ? What do we feel?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Is it really a good question?
You cannot deny what Jalen has done in this league so far.
Let's be real. Who's the better quarterback? Who's the better quarterback? Who's the better quarterback?
Like just pure quarterback talent alone? Are we adding in athleticism and stuff? Or we just
who would you rather have? Knowing what you know, watching what you've watched, who would you rather have?
Just because you say, I would say CJ. I would say CJ. It's close, but I would say CJ.
And I'm also looking at the 2022 Eagles. Devontae Smith, shout out to D. Smith, who just got paid recently. 136 targets, 95 catches, nearly 1,200 yards, 7 TDs. A.J. Brown, 145 targets, 88 catches, nearly 1,500 yards, 17 yards per catch, 11 TDs. Dallas Goedert, which is their third option because it's their offense, 702 yards, 3 TDs, 13 yards per catch. I think you put Tank Dell in that role or those numbers compared to who he's also playing alongside, that is very successful. And if John Mechie goes out there and he has nearly 400 yards and 3 TDs like Quez Watkins, oh, that's pretty good. So what I'm getting at is it is doable. It's been doable for an offense in Cincy with Joe Burrow, who we believe is an all-world quarterback talent. It's been doable in an offense for Philly with a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, who has his limitations. It's doable. They got the talent to do it. Why should we not have expectations to go see Nico Collins, 1,000 yards from 85 catches with 5 or 6 TDs?
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Nico Collins installment of Locked On Nico Collins, your wide receiver every day.
Must be the money. What's the best Get Money song?
I don't know. I mean, I want to say More Money, More Problems, but the artist of that song, might be, a little bit canceled now. So, might have to.
He ain't no Nico Collins, I'll tell you that.
Hell no, he not. But look, yesterday marks the 50th day anniversary, I'm gonna call this. So when the Houston Texans landed Stephon Diggs in a trade. Shout out to Sports Radio 610 for also bringing this to everybody's attention. And John, I just wanted to go back really quick and just take a look at that trade, but not just the trade, just also looking at who the Houston Texans came close. And that was Keenan Allen, of course, when the Los Angeles Chargers was about to trade him. They at the end of the day, they just didn't want to pair him in the AFC, especially with another great quarterback in CJ Stroud. But traded him to Chicago. A couple weeks later, Houston Texans were able to snag Stephon Diggs, who I think is also the better talent. But John, throughout this whole entire show, we sat here talking about, the fact that Nico Collins should definitely stay, quote unquote, wide receiver number 1. Or if you don't want to put a label on him as WR1, just look at him more so as the prime wide receiver that you're going to feature within your offense. And I think rightfully so, because not only given what he did last year, but you also got to take a look at from the situation that he's younger. And not only is he younger, in my opinion, he might be more so of a more greater threat given his 6'4" stature. And for those of you guys who's been rocking with the show ever since me and John took over, you guys know that's been one of, if not my favorite attribute of Nico Collins, the fact that he's 6'4" and he could definitely easily win those 50-50 balls. Just go back and take a look at the season finale against the Indianapolis Colts if you don't believe me. But John, just knowing what we know about Stephon Diggs and whether or not what he can do for this offense and what he can possibly or potentially probably can't do for this offense, when you take a look at some of the mishaps that he has, when you go back and you take a look at Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs, do you think the Houston Texans came out in a better situation landing Diggs and coming up short on Allen? Or do you think they probably would have been better off with Allen and, then that would have never gave them opportunity to land Diggs?
I don't have a response to that. I don't want to lie. I don't have a real response because Keenan Allen balled out last year.
Mm-hmm.
Stephon did as well towards the beginning of the year. I think the end of the year tailed off a little bit because of the relationship issues with the with the quarterback Josh Allen and the offensive ups and downs in terms of play calling and everything. I think what Stephon gives you, if I could give a thought, is being able to be impactful and beat a corner down within 1 to 9 yards of a route, 1 to 8 yards of a route. But Keenan Allen does the same thing. I think Diggs is the right move. Don't get me wrong, but in comparison to right now, I'm indifferent. I'm very indifferent. I don't know, but I do believe that they needed to make a move, whether it was Keenan Allen or Diggs. No matter which one, it would have been the right move. I would say what was maybe not the right move was voiding all 3 years left, 2 years. Yeah. Maybe that wouldn't have been the right move. Maybe you would have given yourself some insurance if he goes out there and ball out. You got him. You got another productive receiver on your roster for another year. But in terms of getting the player, it was the right move.
I think the Houston Texans came out really good in this situation. Don't get me wrong, always did like Keenan Allen. One wide receiver I always respected, but man, they had an opportunity to go get Stephon Diggs, man. And the only reason why I really wanted to talk about this conversation because a lot of people, they've been some fans out there, they've been, indifferent about Diggs coming to Houston. A lot of it has to do with the potential off-field stuff that I don't want to get into because
has he
everything.
Beat up anybody? Has he fought a teammate? Has he fought a locker, a coach?
No.
Does he have speeding ticket? Like you, it's kind of like, and I'm not saying he's that caliber of receiver, but it's kind of like T.O. Like, okay, what off-field issue do he really have?
That's a good point. I ain't think about it like that because T.O. was
competitive.
Just like that.
He's competitive. And we've seen T.O. elevate offenses no matter where he's gone. We've also seen T.O. get into it with his quarterbacks everywhere he's gone, but we've seen him elevate it. Now, what I think the difference is with Stephon and T.O. getting into it with the quarterbacks, T.O. probably was just getting into it with the quarterbacks because he wasn't feeding them enough. I think Stephon had a legit reason why to be upset with not only Josh Allen, but how the offense was going in general last year. But he ain't got no real off-the-field issues to be really concerned about. He's just a vocal diva wide receiver that wants to win. And quite frankly, Houston can use that. After years of Chad Hansen and Kiki QT, who I think
hey man, not too much on Chad Hansen, man. Chad Hansen ball while he was here.
Okay. I mean, who else? Brandon Cooks is ready to get up out of here, right?
I know he regretting that now.
Oh well,
boy.
Right. Let's see what other receiver Houston. Braxton Miller in that experience.
I mean, Will Fuller.
Anthony
Miller.
Anthony Miller that was traded for and released a few days later. So, like, getting guys of his stature and how he comes and prepares for the game, I don't think nothing wrong with it, man. He ain't got no reason to be scared of him. He's not a violent person. He's just competitive. And that's a good thing in the sport.
As much as I like Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs is the better talent to me, man.
I'm
And
not
it's
mad at that.
simple. So, of course, I think the Houston Texans made the right move. And John, everything that you said about his personality being competitive, that is what I was going to get at, because that is something that D'Amico Ryans has talked about not only in a press conference with us last week, but he also talked about it with Rich Eisenhower. I want to say 2 weeks ago when he was a guest on his show. And every time where anybody asks Coach D'Amico Ryans about the experience of getting an opportunity to work with Stephon on and off the field, man, he always raves about his personality, especially his competitive nature. And that is something that Coach D'Amico Ryans love. And that's also something that CJ Stroud loves as well. I think with both of those guys working alongside Stephon Diggs, there can definitely be a marriage that's going to be possibly Diggs' most successful tenure with the franchise. But Diggs, Tank, Mechie, Hutchinson, for the sake of, because they're still on the team right now, Noah Brown and Robert Woods, you got our guy Jared Wayne, all with Nico Collins. This is about to be this is about to be the best offense we have ever seen here in the city of Houston for your Houston Texans, man. This season is about to be fun.
It's gonna be lit, man. And again, like you got guys that it's in Houston now that's hungry to play football. Really quick, Nico Collins is from the South. So Lil Wayne, Money on My Mind, or Kendrick Lamar, Money Trees.
Gotta go Wayne, man.
Gotta go Wayne.
I understand K Dot right now is still number one on the Billboard charts, and rightfully so.
Imagine Rock up in them projects. Hold on, man. J-Rock verse to be in the Smithsonian.
First of all, I'm biased. First, I'm biased, so definitely I'm gonna go with Wayne. Come on now.
I ain't mad at that. I'm not mad at that. I'm also not mad at Nico Collins getting his paper. Congratulations. Hopefully we'll have him on the show one day. Let him know, just like he suffered through those bad years, we suffered too, and we should all reap the benefits of a successful season. But make sure you guys subscribe to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube at Locked On Texans. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Texans, and give me a follow at John_Hickman12 on Twitter as well.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTY DAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.
Peace.